Do you remember the Little Einsteins? It was an early 2000s musical-based preschool-aged cartoon that was pretty educational, talking about the arts, music, and well, not physics. But there was always something strange about it. The weird absence of, well, any parental figure, with none of these kids having parents. Or how these kids can seemingly fly a sentient, ultra-powerful plane rocket ship. Or how the villain of the show is a Russian MiG-29 jet called Big Jet that's sole purpose is to steal from these children and be a nuisance. There is something so weird about this show that no one ever questions, and well, I think I have the answer, because Little Einsteins is so much deeper than you would think, and I'm gonna prove it to you. If you thought my Bubble Guppies theory was crazy, then oh boy, this one is even crazier. This is the Little Einsteins Cold War theory. There's something off about the actual world of the Little Einsteins. I mean, in the way of the world feels fundamentally different than our own, but pretends it's the same one. What do I mean by that? Well, what's the plot of the Little Einsteins learning about the real world pre-21st century and its artists and musicians using real world live action pictures and placing them in our own world? This is very weird because one thing, other than the Little Einsteins, there are no humans in this show. None. These kids have no parents, no human teachers, no peers, just nothing. Well, to be fair, there is one other human named Santa Claus, but you know, he may not even be human. He's a fairy tale magical being who's not necessarily confirmed to be human and could, say, be an elf. So who even is in the show? Well, there's some hyper intelligent animals like butterflies and bears and just about anything you can name, and weird doll creatures or even robots. The show doesn't have a lack of life in the world, it's just a lack of human life. So the question is, why? Well, looking at the facts, it seems humans for sure existed because we are learning about human history, specifically history falling before 21st century, but at the very most going up to 1989 because another detail we'll get into later. Now, where we are now, I believe, is in the future, but a different one than our own. See, in the show, there are many robots and seemingly sentient self-driving planes, and even Rocket, the name of a character in the show, the Little Einsteins fly on. Rocket isn't just a rocket though. He's very much alive. He can make decisions, fly basically on his own, and while yes, it looks like the kids are piloting him, in reality, they're just dancing and telling him where to go when he's taking them. They also call him a he, give him a name, and have an entire episode where they don't feed him soup made out of moon cheese, he'll die, so it just seems he's very much alive. Now, why does this matter? Well, if you said mass rocket, there's also the Big Jet, the antagonist of the show, a Soviet Union MiG-29 jet. You heard me right, an actual Soviet Union jet. This is crazy because Rocket is just a weird red spaceship generic looking plane, but Big Jet is an actual real Soviet Union era jet made for war, specifically the Cold War. That is crazy. It makes me wonder if Big Jet is connected to war in the Soviet Union and even the Cold War. What else in the show is alluding or even caused by war? And oh boy, did I find what ended up being the title of this video. Let me explain. So far, we know the Little Einsteins have to exist in the future because they study things from before the 21st century, and the lack of humans means something wiped them out, but for some reason these few kids are here and studying their own lore. We also know that Big Jet is literally a military war jet, specifically from the Cold War. We also know the show is filled with robots, robotic-like characters, and hyper-intelligent or even evolved animals. Piecing all these details together, we get one tying theme. The Cold War killed the human race. Okay, that may seem like I'm jumping the gun, but I have some more ground for it that I can convince convince you. I believe the Cold War in this universe was actually a nuclear war, as I believe the progression that the Little Einsteins universe had was way faster than our own. They have technology like flying, self-driving rockets, and even military jet. They have robots that are clearly man-made because they take the appearance after us, and the animals of this world really don't seem to interact with them at all. Now, if humanity advanced faster, the Cold War would be like our World War III, at least in terms of how deadly it would be, as they clearly have evidence of self-driving warplanes, or even magic, as not only is Santa possibly human, but also in a special episode, we do actually meet another human, being a magical queen with a magical mirror, which basically acts as her magic wand. It's alluded she's immortal, and it would fit with her being obsessed with beauty and having a mirror for her magic possession, so she could have existed before this great nuclear disaster and survived it. This would mean that magic could as well existed before the war, and that would definitely affect humanity, its technology, and war in ways we can't even grasp. Deadly and even nuclear ways. There's even more evidence of this being set in an advanced version of the Cold War, with Rocket and Big Jet both having access to high-speed space travel, and them both being able to go to the moon. In my opinion, if Rocket and Big Jet are remnants of an old but way more advanced technology from a deadlier nuclear Cold War, maybe the space race was way more of a race than just getting to the moon. Maybe a race to Mars, or even with these speeds and really all the technology Rocket and Big Jet both have, anywhere in the galaxy. What this war is doesn't really matter, it just seems that it was their version of the Cold War, but way more advanced, and in the end, a total nuclear disaster for all humans on Earth. The final reason I believe it was a nuclear disaster is the hyper-evolved animals. This, while not really being a real thing that would happen in the real world, is a trope a lot of post-apocalyptic nuclear disaster stories use. The animals evolved as humans were gone with the help of maybe radiation, or in this world's case, maybe literal magic. All of these points together point to one thing: a deadly nuclear Cold War. But if humans are truly gone, wiping themselves out off the map, who are the Little Einsteins? And why are they here in the first place? Let's talk about the kids. Leo, Annie, Quincy, and June. These kids have no parents, have no real past, and their entire life seems built and dedicated to learning about the past of humans and their arts and music. Now why and where did they even come from? These kids have to be designed or the result of something. They need a reason they're doing all this. I think maybe they were specifically designed to learn about themselves, humans. Maybe long dead scientists knew humanity was about to end. In the last attempt to save the human race or keep its culture alive, they froze some humans or cloned them or had robots genetically build them centuries later when it was safe. It doesn't really matter. These kids were just somehow made by human scientists, then frozen away till the earth was safe for them to come out. Simple. This is pretty evident if you look at a few different things. For example, Rocket is basically childproof. Again, he basically flies himself, but also to even fly in the first place, all 4 kids must put their fingertips scanned on the control pad or he won't turn on. It's the same with the leaving or entering their secret base. Now, not only them living underground would make sense if this was the last remaining human lab or bunker, that's where the kids in Rocket were stored till it was safe, but also, more importantly, it means Rocket is for these children. It takes all their actual unique DNA, which would mean someone programmed and built Rocket in the secret base for these kids and their DNA in mind. The world is also filled with helper robots and dolls that seem very much like robots that all like to help and make sure these kids are learning about human history and culture, even though they're supposedly random robots. This isn't an accident. These kids are humanity's last hope, manufactured for the sole purpose of being educated. But why? Why is humanity's last hope for children, possibly centuries or even thousands of years later, after humanity is gone, to learn about Mozart and random semi-famous painters from the early 20th century? Well, I think I know why. Let me explain. Okay, before we fully explain how these kids truly matter to the greater mission, I need to explain another facet of this weird Cold War nuclear disaster and how I believe Big Jet, the Soviet Union plane, is either programmed by the United States government to trick these children into hating Russians, or is a really vengeful Soviet Union era AI. I know both of these options sound very crazy, or in other words, a perfect reasonable explanation given by Noah Bolter to solve a question you didn't need to answer on a kids show. Big Jet is basically the semi-antagonist until eventually he kind of stops popping up. They do try to do a few versions of the redemption arc, but basically for most of Little Einsteins, he is the villain. Now Big Jet is kind of like Swiper from Door, and he really just enjoys stealing from these children and just being a horrible nuisance. Literally on the Little Einsteins wiki, from word, they describe him as cruel, competitive, merciless, unfair, arrogant, and selfish, liking to ruin the Little Einsteins' fun and lives. And you know, the show kind of backs it up. Dude sucks. Almost comically sucks. Now, this is where things get a little bizarre, and I need you to stay with me. At first, I thought maybe he's just leftover war technology and has a grudge against Rocket and Little Einsteins because they're American and American technology. In the show, they do describe Rocket and Big Jet literally being mortal enemies. In my opinion, maybe even war enemies. But then I thought crazier because my brain is broken and I came to a little different of a conclusion. Big Jet is comically bad and very much represents Russians and the Soviet Union very poorly to these children, while everywhere else, especially the United States, is shown very well. When looking even deeper into this, they did go to Russia very shortly, and the very first line they said about it was very interesting. Russia's so big and beautiful, but there is no music and it's so quiet and sad. That feels very weird. They even made a note that Big Jet lives there, so they know Big Jet is Russian. So my conclusion is, what if in an attempt to sneak in some Cold War United States propaganda, the government stole or built their own Soviet Union MiG-29 jet, snuck it away somewhere just like the scientists did with the rocket and kid, and so when the kids wake up, he can make sure to represent the Soviet Union and Russia just like they would like, very poorly. And so when he wakes up, and so when the kids wake up, he can make sure to represent the Soviet Union and Russia just like they would like, very poorly. Now, why they would do this being the US government is more interesting and complicated than just trying to fill these kids with some extra American pride, and goes into what these kids are actually here for. Let me explain. This show is about the Little Einsteins learning about their past, but that's not what it's all about. It's also about them teaching the other beings of this world the music and art and even culture of humans. And well, if you think about it in the terms of this weird war, government, and scientific plan, it makes a lot of sense. Instead of physically reviving the humans, what if these kids are slowly but steadily culturally reviving the human race? What if they are not even to their knowledge, but in reality teaching and indoctrinating the hyper-intelligent animals of this world into the world of the past? It's evident everywhere. A literal United Nations looking court of butterflies copying our own countries after the kids explain old countries, or random animals now slowly but steadily learning music. Remember, they said Russia was quiet, musicless until they came, and that most likely was the same for most of the world. The Little Einsteins are slowly but steadily reviving humanity, not by cloning themselves or anything physical, but by turning the animals themselves into humans, engraving our own culture into their lives. And who knows what's to come after this. The Little Einsteins in the end are a prop for a dead race and are still little, but no matter what, no matter they are teaching the world or solely indoctrinating into hyper Cold War era United States nationalism, they will always have their favorite rocket ship.